Hi, Belle. I've already introduced you on the radio. It's a little bit strange because I'm going to be introducing you after the interview. But let's get started because we have about 20 minutes. And I wanted to really go through a lot of what you're going to be doing in an upcoming concert at Westminster United Church, as well as talk about your background in general. So let's begin with, can you tell me a little bit about your background, how you become so interested in the Holocaust and in putting on a concert such as this? What was your family background?
Well, I'm the child of two survivors who unfortunately passed away quite a long time ago, over 30 years ago, both of whom were in concentration camps. My dad was in 6 concentration camps. My mom was in the Lodz ghetto and then in Auschwitz and a couple of other camps. So that's really what has me interested in all of this, of course. And the concert, of course, comes from my musical background. I've been singing since the age of 10, and music is a big part of my life.
Yeah. So tell me something about your growing up. You were telling me before we started this interview about your growing up in River Heights. And tell me how it was that your father decided to set up shop or live in River Heights.
Well, my dad, as you know, as I said, was a survivor, and most of the survivors lived in north. But my dad seemed to see that the future was in River Heights. So he had this grocery store in St. Boniface and built a house in River Heights, and I attended Vermont School, and really was one of the few kids, well, certainly the only kid in my class, I think, that was of that background who had a parent that was a first-generation Canadian and a survivor. Most of the other kids were at least second, some third generation, so kind of an anomaly.
Yeah, that's unusual because in looking at the history of post-war migration to Winnipeg, did your parents receive help from JIAS, for instance, Jewish Immigration Aid Society?
No.
Oh, they didn't?
No. No, my dad came here, he was really all on his own. He came in 1948.
Mm-hmm.
He had a very, very, very distant relative, Sam Begod, who had a factory that treated furs, and he gave him a job. Their great-grandmothers were second cousins, and that was about as close a relative as my dad had left in the world. And he worked there for a little while until he had enough time to, enough money to scrape together to rent a place for this grocery store. And then eventually he bought the building, and it was on the corner of Marion and Desmiron.
Yeah.
And
next to Inferno, where Inferno is now.
That's
correct?
right.
Yeah, so it's well known. Did your parents meet in Winnipeg, or did they meet in Europe?
They did. They met here. My mom came in 1950, 6 months before the flood.
Oh. And where was she before? Was she in a DP camp?
She was,
Mm-hmm.
yes, yes.
Mm-hmm.
She was actually married just after the war, and had a child with my half-brother, who unfortunately passed away when he was 24.
Mm-hmm.
And her husband died in a car accident when she was 8 months pregnant. So she came here with my brother and was introduced to my dad through mutual friends.
Uh-huh. What about your father? How old was he when he came here?
My dad would have been in his late 30s when he came here, and he also had a wife and child before the war who were killed.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So you grew up in River Heights, but you weren't, we won't describe you as moneyed, as opposed to some of your classmates.
That's right.
All right. And then you told me you've been singing since what, the age 10?
I started studying voice when I was 10,
Mm-hmm.
and I joined the Shaarey Zedek choir when I was 12.
Really? Who was the choir conductor back then? Do you remember?
Sami Tsur.
Okay, so this is back in the, what, early 70s, isn't it?
Late 60s.
I don't want to date you.
You just did.
Okay. Well,
That's okay.
You look very young for a long-time choir member, and you've been in the choir ever since.
With a kind of a hiatus at one point.
So are you the veteran choir member of Shaarey Zedek?
I think Pam Appel is. I think Pam predated me by a year.
Mm-hmm.
Or it could, actually Bonnie Hoffer I think has been in there even longer.
Mm-hmm. Did you study music in other forms? other than singing?
I studied piano, but I hated it.
Oh, okay. Did you take any professional training for singing
Yes, I studied classical voice for 10 years.
here in Winnipeg? And what, did you graduate with anything?
I got up to grade 9 with Royal Conservatory of Music,
Mhm.
and grade 7 Royal Conservatory of Music. You actually have to have with voice in order to get the certificates. You have to have a certain levels of piano that go along with it, and also musical theory.
Mhm. So, now I know you're interested, this particular concert combines two of your loves.
Mhm.
Well, I wouldn't say you love, but you are probably Winnipeg's leading proponent of keeping the Holocaust alive. Now that Philip Weiss has passed on, I can't think of anyone else who does more to commemorate the memory of Holocaust survivors. So tell me something about this particular concert coming up on the 26th.
Well, this concert is to mark International Holocaust Remembrance Day, which is the UN's date, and it coincides, of course, with the liberation of Auschwitz, which is on January 27th. We're having it the night before. And this year, we decided to commemorate the 70 years since the infamous visit of the Red Cross to Theresidenstadt Camp, which is also known as Theresin in Czech. Of course, the Germans gave German names to various places they took over. Auschwitz is, of course, a German name for the camp. And Theresienstadt was a very interesting place. There were many musicians that were sent there, and there was a reason for that. Even in Germany, some of the more famous people in Germany were well regarded, and even some of the people that had military careers in Germany. And the Germans, it was difficult for them to just send them away anywhere. And so they created this camp, and they pretended that it was a good place. And a lot of the German Jews thought that they were going to a spa.
But you know what, let me interrupt you on that point. I've read quite a bit about Theresienstadt. So was it a show place camp?
No, it wasn't really. It was purported to be.
But they did put some of the creme de la creme
Yes.
of European Jewry there.
Yes.
Now you say because there would have been strong opposition from Germans?
It was they pretended that this was a better place than it really was. So they created this sort of myth around the camp that it wasn't really a camp, that they were going to this place that was an easy place for these people to live. But it wasn't that at all. They were put to work doing hard labor. They packed with them, some of the people that were sent there packed ball gowns. They thought they were going to a spa.
Oh.
But when they got there, they were starved, there was disease, there were many people that died. There were approximately 33,000 people that died in the camp.
There were 60,000 altogether who had been sent there, I read.
Yes.
Is that right?
And 90% of the children died that were sent there. And of course, many people were eventually deported out of the camp and sent east to the death camps. But so when they got there, you know, the conditions were terrible. But it was something of a hybrid between a ghetto and a concentration camp. The difference was that there were all these musicians, artists there, and the musicians in particular were allowed to continue composing and even performing. And when I talk about this Red Cross visit that we're talking about marking the 70th anniversary of, when the Danish Jews were sent to Terezin, the Red Cross did start to get a little bit suspicious.
Danish Jews.
Yes.
Now, the majority of Danish Jews.
There were some
So
Danish Jews that were
this
sent.
was in the famous roundup of Danish Jews.
Right, there were
Where
some.
they were all rounded up in one day, weren't they?
Right, and there were some Danish Jews that were sent to Terezin. And so the Red Cross got a little bit suspicious.
What year is this approximately?
This was in 1944.
So it was fairly late.
Right, and they asked to have a visit. And so the Nazis choreographed this visit down to the last detail. They planted gardens. They put in fake storefronts. They filled shops with the goods that the people who were in prison there had actually bought in their own luggage. And they had, all of a sudden, they had these children playing in the fields. They fed them bread and butter. These kids had never seen butter before since they'd arrived there. They had soccer games, and they choreographed it so that when the Red Cross went by, the kids scored a goal in front of the Red Cross. And then they had this concert. Now, this conductor named Raphael Schefter, earlier on, had started having a group of musicians meet, singers, in a cellar where he had found a piano. And he started by teaching them Czech songs by Smetana, such as The Bartered Bride, works such as The Bartered Bride, to help them have hope as they went through this very, very difficult times that they were experiencing. And he brought all of his musical scores with him. And at one point, he pulled out Verdi's Requiem. And he wanted them to perform this. And when he heard about the Red Cross visit, he decided that this was what he wanted them to perform. And he saw in Verdi's Requiem a message that he wanted to give the Nazis. The Latin text talks about divine justice for the wicked. And he taught this group of choristers the entire Requiem, which is very long and very difficult.
It is. It's how many? Is it 2 hours long?
I think so, and it's very beautiful. He explained to them what the Latin text was, and they memorized it all. They didn't have any music in front of them. And he had to, of course, get permission from the elders, and they were very much against him performing this Catholic Requiem, because they felt that here was this one opportunity that they had to perform something and maybe somehow get some kind of message, to the Red Cross, and they didn't want him to perform this Catholic work. They were also afraid that the Nazis were going to be there as well, obviously, as well as the Red Cross, and that maybe that they would understand this message that he was trying to get out, and that he would endanger all of them. But he got his way. And the other part, the other message was there were parts of the Requiem, for instance, where it says in Latin, liberame, liberate us. Mm-hmm. And so what he felt he was trying to say was, liberate us, the Jews. So they did perform that. And they also, some of the people said that they felt that maybe the Requiem was for them, that, they knew that probably they were all going to die. But they did say that...
Let me ask you on this point, because as I've been listening to you and reading about Theresidenstadt, were people actually put to death there, or did they die from the forced labor?
No, they only died from disease, starvation, and forced labor. And in fact, so many of them were dying that they did build a crematorium just to burn the bodies. And the people who survived talked about how difficult this